There comes a moment when the kindest soul stops explaining their pain. Not out of anger, but out of exhausted, sacred clarity. That's when the healing begins, and the narcissist loses their grip. Because an empath who's done is no longer available for manipulation. I remember sitting on the floor of my kitchen, my back pressed against the cabinet, knees pulled in, arms wrapped around my legs like I was trying to hold myself together. The tile was cold, but I didn't move. The clock ticked loudly in the background. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. And I realized, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't even hurting in the same way. I was just done. It's strange, the way the breaking point arrives. We imagine it'll be some dramatic explosion, slamming doors, screaming matches, an epic exit scene from a movie. But that's not how it usually happens. Not for an empath. For people like us, the ones who have given and tried and hoped. The breaking point is often heartbreakingly quiet. It comes not in the moment of pain, but in the moment when pain no longer surprises you. When you've cycled through the same argument for the 100th time. When your voice starts to sound foreign to your own ears, because you're constantly explaining your worth, justifying your needs, begging to be seen. And then suddenly, you don't want to explain anymore. You're not even angry. You just feel clear. There's a sacred kind of exhaustion that sets in when you've reached the edge of your emotional generosity. You stop reaching out. You stop hoping for change. Not because you've given up on love, but because you've finally remembered your own. That moment, the one where the empath stops explaining their pain, is the moment they begin to reclaim their power. And here's the truth that took me years to understand. You can love someone and still walk away from them. You can wish they'd changed and still choose not to wait around for it. You can be done and still be a good person, because being done doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you stopped abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. The most dangerous person to a narcissist is the empath who has found this clarity. Because narcissists feed on confusion, on guilt, on self-doubt. But the moment you say, no more, and mean it, you take away their power. Not with revenge, not with threats, but with quiet, grounded self-respect. You stop chasing validation. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing for approval. You start listening to the part of you that's been whispering for so long, this isn't love. This is survival. And love, real love, doesn't require you to disappear. So if you're there, sitting quietly in your own kitchen, your own car, your own thoughts, feeling like you're at the end of something, I want you to know that's not the end of you. That's the beginning. The beginning of truth. The beginning of boundaries. The beginning of a life where you no longer have to apologize for needing what every human deserves: kindness, respect, reciprocity, and peace. You are not too much. You are never too broken. You are simply done. And that is holy ground. What would happen if you honored that moment instead of doubting it? What would shift if you trusted that being done is not a failure, but a rebirth? Let that stillness speak. Because when an empath finally stops explaining, they finally start becoming. I used to think empathy meant staying no matter what. Staying in the conversation. Staying in the relationship. Staying in the fire. I believed that if I just loved someone hard enough, deep enough, patiently enough, I could help them heal. I could carry their hurt, interpret their silence, decode their cruelty, and somehow find the scared little child behind their behavior. And sometimes I did. Sometimes I caught glimpses of their pain, and because I could see it, I convinced myself it was my responsibility to stay and help them fix it. But there's a cost to carrying pain that isn't yours to hold. And one day, you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself. Empaths have this incredible ability. We feel what others feel. We absorb emotion like a sponge. We walk into a room and immediately notice who's uncomfortable, who's pretending, who's hiding sadness behind a smile. It's beautiful. It's rare. It's real. But when that gift is unguarded, when it's poured out without discernment, it becomes a trap, especially in the hands of a narcissist. Because narcissists don't want connection. They want control. And the empath, with their big, open heart, becomes the perfect target. They feed on your understanding. They twist your compassion into compliance. They weaponize your goodness, turning it into a leash you don't even realize is wrapped around your soul. You make excuses for their behavior. You take the blame even when it hurts. You start to question your memory, your feelings, your worth. Because every time you speak up, you're met with deflection, denial, or rage. And it's confusing because you know you're a good person. You know your intentions are kind. But the more you try to love them well, the more they punish you for it. That's when you start losing yourself. Not in one big moment, but in 100 small ones. The text you don't send, the truth you don't speak, the boundary you ignore, because they're just having a hard day. And here's the truth I wish someone had told me earlier: empathy is not an excuse to stay in harm's way. Empathy with boundaries is strength. Empathy without boundaries is self-erasure. You are not here to be a sponge for someone else's toxicity. You are not here to heal someone who refuses to acknowledge they're broken. You are here to live fully. To love deeply, yes, but not at the cost of your own soul. There is a version of you, a healed, brave, wise version, who still feels everything, but no longer allows that sensitivity to be exploited. They feel the sadness in the room, but don't make it their job to fix it. They hear the pain in someone's voice, but know it's not their responsibility to absorb it. They hold space without losing themselves in it. That's what it means to be a healed empath. To still be kind, but no longer available for manipulation. To still be compassionate, but no longer willing to self-destruct in the name of loyalty. Because here's the paradox. When you finally put down the weight that was never yours to carry, you don't become colder, you become clearer. You begin to see that your gift is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. So I want to ask you something gently, lovingly. Where are you pouring out empathy with no return? Where are you confusing pain tolerance for love? Where are you trying to fix what is not yours to heal? It's okay to let go. It's okay to say, I love you, but I love myself too. It's okay to close the door, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Empathy is your gift, but boundaries are the ribbon that protects it. There's a moment that happens after you've left, after the storm, after the silence, after the space begins to widen between you and them, between who you were in that relationship and who you're slowly remembering yourself to be. At first, it's disorienting. You walk through your days almost like a ghost, free but unsure, liberated but aching. And not necessarily because you miss them, but because you miss the you used to be before you forgot how to protect your heart. You wonder, was it really that bad? Did I imagine the manipulation? Am I the toxic one for walking away? That's what it means to be a healed empath. To still be kind, but no longer available for manipulation. To still be compassionate, but no longer willing to self-destruct in the name of loyalty. Because here's the paradox. When you finally put down the weight that was never yours to carry, you don't become colder, you become clearer. You begin to see that your gift is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. So I want to ask you something gently, lovingly. Where are you pouring out empathy with no return? Where are you confusing pain tolerance for love? Where are you trying to fix what is not yours to heal? It's okay to let go. It's okay to say, I love you, but I love myself too. It's okay to close the door, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Empathy is your gift. But boundaries are the ribbon that protects it. There's a moment that happens after you've left. After the storm. After the silence. After the space begins to widen between you and them. Between who you were in that relationship and who you're slowly remembering yourself to be. At first, it's disorienting. You walk through your days almost like a ghost, free but unsure. Liberated but aching. And not necessarily because you miss them, but because you miss the you used to be before you forgot how to protect your heart. You wonder, was it really that bad? Did I imagine the manipulation? Am I the toxic one for walking away? And that's when the voices creep in. Not just theirs, but your own. The ones they planted in you over time, like weeds in a garden. Subtle at first, then slowly wrapping around your self-worth like vines. No one else would put up with you. You're too sensitive. You're always overreacting. You make everything about you. You start to hear their voice as your own. That's how deep the wound goes. That's how skillful narcissistic abuse is. It doesn't just bruise your heart. It rewrites your story. But this chapter, this is where something sacred happens. This is where the empath stops internalizing the narrative and starts writing a new one. It begins when you decide to sit in the discomfort instead of running from it. When you choose to feel the grief instead of bypassing it with distractions or false forgiveness. When you tell yourself the raw, honest truth, I didn't imagine it, it was real. And I didn't deserve it. This is not the glamorous part of healing. This is the greedy, tender, exhausting part. The part where you take a long, hard look at the ways you learned to abandon yourself. The ways you silenced your intuition. The times you swallowed your truth just to keep someone else from leaving. You may feel shame. You may feel rage. You may feel grief so deep it hums in your bones. Let it all come. Not to drown you, but to cleanse you. Not to punish you, but to bring you home to yourself. This is the reckoning. This is the moment where you stop making excuses for their behavior and start making space for your pain. And it is painful. Because in order to reclaim your power, you have to admit you gave it away. Not because you were weak, but because you were trying to love. I want you to hear that again. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were loving. You stayed because you believed. You stayed because your heart is wide and wild and full of hope. But now is the time to turn that love inward. Now is the time to stop romanticizing the pain and start romanticizing your peace. Now is the time to realize that your worth is not negotiable, and it never has been. The healing journey isn't about becoming a different person. It's about unbecoming everything you were taught to be, to survive. You don't need to be nicer. You don't need to be quieter. You don't need to dim your light to keep others comfortable. You need to be whole. And wholeness includes rage. It includes grief. It includes boundaries. It includes saying, no more. And meaning it with your chest, even if your voice trembles. This is where you begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to you. That not everyone has earned the right to hear your story, to sit with your heart, to be trusted with your vulnerability. You're not selfish for wanting more. You're not broken for walking away. You're not a monster for finally saying, I'm done. You are becoming someone who no longer tolerates emotional starvation. Becoming someone who no longer stays in rooms where they are constantly being explained away. Becoming someone who no longer confuses being needed with being loved. So when the doubts creep in, when the loneliness whispers, when the memory of what almost was pulls at you, hold your ground. That ache you feel? That's your soul regrowing its shape. That confusion. That's your nervous system learning that safety no longer means silence. That sadness. That's your heart clearing space for real connection, not just survival. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're not imagining it. You're healing, and healing is messy, but it's also holy. You don't have to rush it. You don't have to perform it. You just have to stay present with it, and with yourself. There comes a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when something shifts inside of you. You don't announce it to anyone. You don't post about it. You don't even fully recognize it until much later. But it happens. One day, you stop waiting for them to change. You stop rehearsing the argument you never got to finish. You stop fantasizing about the apology that never came. You stop trying to make sense of what made no sense. And you start listening to the voice that's been whispering inside of you all along. The voice that says, you don't have to carry this anymore. And it doesn't feel like a thunderclap. It feels like a release. Like an exhale you didn't know you'd been holding for years. That's the power of being done, not angry, not bitter, not resentful, but done. And that moment, it terrifies a narcissist. Because for so long, they thrived off your hope. They counted on your heart being too soft to leave. They relied on your fear of being the bad guy, your tendency to give second, third, 10th chances. They knew exactly which buttons to press to keep you doubting yourself, stuck in the cycle, apologizing for bleeding after they cut you. But when an empath is done, truly done, it's not performative. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving anything. It's about peace. And peace is the one thing a narcissist cannot control. Because here's the truth, they weren't feeding off your love. They were feeding off your longing, your confusion, your inability to let go, your desperate search for closure, for clarity, for consistency, something they never had any intention of giving you. When you're still entangled in those longings, they know they still have a hold on you. But when you release the need for understanding, when you stop trying to win someone over who was never playing fair, you become free in a way that cannot be manipulated. You no longer engage in their games because you see the game for what it is. You no longer try to justify yourself to someone who was never listening. You no longer shift to keep the peace, because now you understand peace that requires yourself. Abandonment is not peace. This is when you reclaim your voice, not just to speak to others, but to speak to yourself. You start noticing the ways you betrayed your own body to stay. How your gut screamed and you silenced it. How your chest tightened and you called it anxiety instead of wisdom. How your exhaustion wasn't from doing too much, but from constantly trying to regulate someone else's chaos. And slowly, gently, bravely, you stop betraying yourself. You start saying no. You start unfollowing, deleting, disengaging. You start choosing silence over arguments, distance over dysfunction, solitude over false connection. And it's not easy. Because letting go of a narcissist means letting go of the fantasy, the dream of what it could have been. And grief, in this space, is complicated. You grieve not only what happened, but everything you hoped would happen. The version of them you thought was real. The version of you that thought love alone could be enough. But grief is a doorway. It opens into something truer, something sturdier. You begin to rebuild, not just your life, but your sense of self. You reconnect with the parts of you that were silenced in the storm. The playful parts, the creative parts, the restful, silly, wild, tender parts that got buried under all that vigilance. You realize that the things they called too much were your gifts. Your sensitivity is your compass. Your empathy is your light. Your need for depth, your hunger for honesty, your capacity for love. These are not weaknesses. These are sacred. But now you know your love must have a gate. Your heart must have a guard. Your empathy must include you. Because if you do not protect your peace, you will always be at the mercy of people who feed on chaos. This is the shift. This is the power. Not in becoming harder, but in becoming whole. Not in returning fire with fire, but in refusing to burn for anyone ever again. You are no longer a hostage to hope. You are no longer performing for crumbs. You are no longer shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You are becoming who you were before you forgot your worth. Before you were told that your emotions were too much. Before you were taught that love meant pain. Before you believed that being chosen was more important than being cherished. So let this be your quiet revolution. You don't have to yell. You don't have to prove. You don't have to justify. You only have to remember who you are and walk away like someone who finally knows what they're worth. There's a quiet power in not needing to be understood, in no longer begging to be seen by someone who always looked away, in no longer trying to explain your heart to someone who only ever weaponized your vulnerability. At some point, you stop wanting closure and you start choosing clarity. And clarity, my friend, is the beginning of everything. When an empath is finally done, something extraordinary happens. They start to come home to themselves. Not all at once. Not in some triumphant movie scene crescendo, but slowly, tenderly, truth by quiet truth. You start noticing the moments you smile and it's real. You catch yourself laughing and realize you're not performing anymore. You feel your shoulders relax, your breath deepen, your thoughts slow, because you are no longer tiptoeing around someone else's unhealed chaos. You are no longer making yourself small to keep the peace. You are no longer walking on emotional eggshells, hoping today won't be the day they detonate. And maybe the world doesn't look very different on the outside. You're still waking up, brushing your teeth, going to work, coming home. But inside, the landscape has changed. The war is over. It's quiet now. And in that stillness, something sacred emerges. You start to hear yourself again. You hear the voice that says, you don't have to earn love. You don't have to chase worthiness. You don't have to fix what you didn't break. You begin to understand that boundaries are not walls. They are declarations of value. That walking away isn't cruelty, it's clarity. That self-respect isn't arrogance. It's alignment. You no longer feel the urge to convince people of your goodness. You simply are good. You no longer feel the need to prove your loyalty. You know what you bring to the table. Because here's the most dangerous truth to a narcissist. You now know your own power. You've seen what happens when you pour yourself into someone who only ever gave you a thimble of love in return. You felt the ache of being emotionally orphaned in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside. You've lived through the gaslighting, the confusion, the twisted blame that left you questioning your own mind. And yet, you're still here, wiser, softer, stronger in ways that no one can see but you. And that strength, it didn't come from fighting back. It came from letting go. From no longer needing to be right, from no longer needing their validation, from realizing that peace is better than control and authenticity is better than approval. You are no longer a reflection of someone else's emptiness. You are the embodiment of your own fullness, and that fullness can no longer be dimmed to keep someone else from feeling small. So here's what I want you to hold on to. You didn't fail the relationship. You outgrew the pattern. You didn't walk away because you stopped loving them. You walked away because you started loving you. And it wasn't easy. God, it wasn't easy. It was brutal, lonely, disorienting. Peeling your fingers from something you wanted so badly to work, holding your heart together with trembling hands while you relearned what it meant to belong to yourself. But you did it. And now, you are a storm with skin. You are a lighthouse that no longer dims for passing ships. You are the safe place you were always searching for. You've turned your pain into wisdom. You've turned your boundaries into prayer. You've turned your silence into strength. And no one can take that from you again. So here's the invitation. Keep choosing yourself. Keep protecting your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Keep honoring your softness, not as a flaw, but as a superpower. Because the most dangerous person to a narcissist is the empath who finally realized my heart is mine to protect. My voice is mine to use. My life is mine to live. You are free now, and freedom looks good on you.